Now, a new report by the Women's Rights Network has revealed the truly shocking numbers of rapes and sexual assaults which are happening in our hospitals, where you would surely expect people to feel safe. According to the report, more than 6,500 rapes and sexual assaults, some against children under 13, have been committed in hospitals in England and Wales over nearly 4 years. Only 265 people, that's a mere 4.1%, are known to have been charged for these offences. Professor Jo Phoenix authored the report, and she joins me now to discuss it. Jo, thanks so much for joining us today. Perhaps if you could talk us through, what is the most significant and shocking element of this report?
Just the sheer scale of it, the sheer scale. I think one of the strange things about this is it's not the first time this sort of stuff has been reported. There were things that were reported in November of last year. And then previously, about 2 years ago, Lancashire, one of the Lancashire newspapers, also reported this, but nobody seemed to pay attention. One of the different things about this report, however, is it comes off the back of the Freedom of Information requests that we made to 43 police forces. As it happens, only 35 responded.
Right.
So Northern Ireland didn't respond. Scotland didn't respond.
Is that legal, though? Are they not meant to with Freedom of Information requests?
Yeah, it's legal not to respond.
It is legal not to respond?
It is legal not to respond. So the two responses can be, we don't hold the data, so we can't give it to you, or to get that data would be prohibitively costly.
I see.
Yeah.
But you wanted to find this data because you were aware that this kind of information has not been out there.
No.
We've just had no way to quantify the extent of the problem.
No, none at all. So the crime survey for England and Wales asks victims where rapes take place. And one of those categories is somewhere else, either in a perpetrator's home or, you know, a victim's home, and a whole series of others. But that somewhere else category accounts for around 19% of rapes reported to the crime survey of England and Wales. That somewhere else isn't broken down, yet we know that there's sexual violence that takes place in hospitals. So this was an attempt to, if you like, get under the bonnet of that and find out what is the shape and size of the problem. Now, I find it quite odd, just as, you know, a criminologist of 26 years now, I find it quite odd that the police don't have a marker on any of the data that they collect that would indicate hospitals. Because, as we said in that report, hospitals aren't somewhere else. Hospitals are a very specific environment where there's often intimate care of one variety or another, and it's also where we are often, as the report title is, are most vulnerable. Well,
quite. So for predatory opportunists, it's the place, you know, obviously there's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
But also this was recorded, or the information that you found was from the period of the pandemic.
Quite.
Now, there's issues with that. I mean, you mentioned in your article for the Mail that, you know, of course, people are wearing masks. That's a good way to hide your identity.
Yes.
But at the same time, you would expect during a pandemic there to be heightened security in the hospitals.
Indeed, and there was. I mean, I think the question about, you know, predatory men coming into hospitals, we presume it's men, of course, because, you know, 99% of sexual violence is committed by men. But I presume that that's actually a very low number of people actually coming into the hospitals like that. The stories that have come out, either on Twitter or people who have emailed me directly as a result of the publication of the report, have been stories of junior doctors, physiotherapists, healthcare assistants, basically committing sexual violence. So I think that idea that the sexual offender is somewhere out there, you know, this predatory individual, actually what this report may be indicating is that the sexual predator is in here.
And isn't that the case so often with sexual assaults? Case of sexual assaults, it's people that people know or who are residing nearby.
Absolutely. Now, there's something else that's really important about this report. The other thing that we didn't ask for, in retrospect we maybe should have, but I'd like to go back and ask for it, is the sex of the victims, the actual location in hospitals, and the sex of the perpetrators, right? Now, funnily enough, being able to ask that question I would never have been able to do it. I don't mean to go back to the Open University, but I would never have been able to do that at the Open University, because even asking a question like that would have had to have gone through the Ethics Committee, and it could have got stuck there.
It might be worth talking to people about, or just explaining what happened to you and your experience at the Open University.
Oh, yes, I've lived it for so long now, I assume everybody knows. I worked at the Open University for quite a while. I hold gender-critical views. I wanted to ask about the competing rights of transgender prisoners and women in prison. I've done, 26 years of sexual violence and crimes against women, so I wanted to ask about that whole question. I had been basically silenced by my colleagues. I was silenced after I got cancelled at Essex University. I then, after the Reindorf report, which was a report into what happened to me at Essex, said that cancelling academics is unlawful. And then after the Maya Forstater ruling, which gave us protected gender-critical rights, I launched the Open University Gender Critical Research Network, and my life descended into what can only be described as just a continuum of hell. There was petitions that were signed, open letters that were put forward. My direct colleagues were asking for us to be discriminated against, for the university to disaffiliate the research network, simply because, and this is where we come back to the question with the report,
yes,
that research network, its mission was to ask where, why, when, how, and to what effect sex matters.
People will be really shocked I mean, you also got a lot of harassment and abuse, and it was very, we've discussed this before.
Yeah.
And people will be shocked that an academic of such high standing, who is simply asking the questions that an academic, I mean, you're a criminologist, this is your job.
Quite.
But because of the sensitivity around this particular area, that you should be demonised and monstered.
Yeah.
As a means to prevent the facts coming out.
Yeah, well, quite. And even in the reaction to the report, interestingly, there on Twitter, if you take Twitter to mean anything, on Twitter there have been several attempts to brand this piece of research transphobic, which is just crazy in my mind, because what we're actually talking about is, sexual violence in hospitals. But because one of the calls to action is to actually rethink the suspension of Annex B, in other words, to reintroduce single-sex wards. And one of the other calls to action is to actually get the information from the police about whether it's female victims or male perpetrators.
But this is very important, isn't it? Because last year, there was an attempted sexual assault at a hospital in London, and the police were called. The police turned up and said to the members of staff, well, we need to investigate this. And the staff said that it's not possible because there's no men on that ward, knowing full well that there was a biological male who identified as female on the ward. Yeah. So, and that means there are serious stakes here.
There are serious stakes, and it isn't just what's happening in hospitals and the degree to which, for lack of better words, gender identity ideology is underpinning how hospitals are approaching this issue. And I'll just kind of sideways for a second here. Part of the report was looking at the policies that NHS Foundation Trusts use, hospitals use, the Care Standards Quality Commission use, and the push behind all of those policies is to create sexual safety. Right? And they talk about sexual safety incidences. That is the first time in my life I have ever heard sexual violence referred to as sexual safety. And part of that is around, ensuring that gender identity is respected. If you read these policies, they quite literally, and I hate to use the word, but they erase sexual violence. Now, I don't know if I have a second more, but if I have one more second. The other thing that in the reaction to the report that has come to light is that the police forces who did answer the FOI didn't take, some police forces didn't take it seriously. Now, I'm just going to mention one, Derbyshire Police Force. If you look on the table that we provide in the report, they were the second highest for rapes and sexual assaults, with just over 1,000, right? Now, when the report landed and it attracted so much media attention, Derbyshire Police Force contacted WRN, and they also made a public statement saying that when they did the FOI, all they did was, in effect, a fuzzy word search for the word hospital on any sexual violence case. So they justified, in one statement that they made, they justified the fact that those numbers were so high because it could have occurred on something like a road called Hospital Road. Right? Now, at that time, when I discovered that, I thought, well, this is ludicrous, because I'm sure there aren't that many hospital roads in the Derbyshire Police Force area. But they've gone back, they've re-looked at their own data, and the numbers come in much lower. There has been, a request to change the data. We're not going to, because that report is an historical report.
But what does that tell you, that there wasn't that diligence about such a serious subject?
Quite.
I mean, that's very, very disturbing.
Well, it's very disturbing when you put it in light of the Casey report and, the question of institutional misogyny within police forces. It's a very serious problem.
Well, it's a really important report, and, I hope it does raise the awareness that needs to be raised as a result. Jo Phoenix, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.